Okay, I'd like to call this public meeting of Scranton City Council, March 23rd, 2021 to order. Would everyone please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Would everyone please remain standing for a moment of silent reflection for our servicemen and women throughout the world, and also for those who have passed away in our community, especially Patrick Toch Purcell, who tragically passed away this past weekend. Toch was well known throughout our city, was a kind-hearted person who will be missed by everyone who knew him, and our prayers go out to the Purcell family. Let us also take a moment of silence tonight for all of the people in our community, in our country, and throughout our world who have passed away from the coronavirus. This pandemic has turned our world upside down, but we must remain hopeful and strong. We continue to pray for the doctors, nurses, and researchers and all medical professionals who seek to heal and help those affected and who put themselves at risk in the process. May they have protection and peace. Whether we are home or abroad, surrounded by many people suffering from this illness or only a few, let us stick together, endure together, mourn together, and in place of our anxiety, let us have hope and peace. Thank you. Roll call, please.
Mr. Schuster?
Present.
Mr. McAndrew?
Present.
Dr. Rothschild?
Here.
Mr. Donahue?
Here.
Mr. Gahn?
Here. I'd like to announce that an executive session was held this afternoon to discuss a personnel issue. Mrs. Reed, please dispense with the reading of the minutes.
Thank you. Third order, 3A, correspondence received from Pennsylvania Economy League dated March 15, 2021 regarding a review of the proposed collective bargaining agreement with Local Lodge 2462. 3B, Controller's Report for month ending February 28, 2021. 3C, minutes of the non-uniform Municipal Pension Board meeting held February 17, 2021. 3D, agenda for the non-uniform Municipal Pension Board meeting held March 17, 2021. 3E, minutes of the Scranton Police Pension Commission meeting held February 17, 2021. 3F, Lackawanna County Planning Commission Subdivision and Land Development Evaluation Reports reviewed March 2, 2021 and March 5, 2021. 3G, minutes of the Ethics Board meeting held February 10, 2021. 3H, correspondence received from Ethics Board dated March 15, 2021 regarding candidate campaign contribution limitations and reporting requirements. 3I, Open Gov cost summary and financial disclosures.
Thank you. Are there any comments on any of the third order items?
Yeah, I had 3 comments on third order items. So looking at 3C, there seemed to be, going through those minutes, it seemed like there was some confusion over the date when to submit for retirement. I kind of heard that was some kind of an issue, but I also saw it in those minutes. And I think also if maybe Mr. Dealey could touch on this a little later on. I think he stated that there was
Financial
I think he stated that it was hard to deal with City Hall being closed. So if it's a possibility, if Mr. Dealey can maybe touch on the timeline when if City Hall plans on opening anytime soon. And then with 3I, the open government cost summary, there were several answers where in the disclosure forms that it said specific personnel names after execution of contract. If you could just explain that somewhat.
Okay, anyone else on the third order items? If not, received and filed. Do any council members have any announcements at this time?
I have one. Friends of the Poor, next Wednesday, March 31st at Scranton High, we'll have an Easter food and basket giveaway, which is pretty cool for the holiday coming up, between 10 and 5 p.m. at Scranton High, and there'll be on-site registration. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Yes, I just wanted to congratulate the Scranton Fringe Festival and their partners on this past weekend's Porch Fest. It was really successful. A lot of people went throughout the city and utilized the maps that they provided to check out the property owners and businesses that were participating in it. I know that it gave me and my family a great opportunity to get out of the house and go for a walk around the neighborhood and listen to some music. And it was just a very enjoyable weekend. And I hope to see more events like that. It was, it was very safe in terms of COVID and, really nice way to get to see people. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Mrs. Reed?
Fourth order, citizens' participation.
At this time, would someone please make a motion to accept public comment from the following individuals: Glenn Clark, Bev DeBarros, and Thomas Coyne?
Make a motion to accept public comment.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second to accept public comment. Mrs. Reed, would you please read the comments into the record?
Thank you. The first submission is from Mr. Glenn Clark as follows. I reference Exhibit B as it pertains to this correspondence. My name is Glenn R. Clark and my spouse is Valerie M. Clark. We jointly own the property at 801-803 North Main Avenue. This property is a 4-unit apartment building licensed as required by the city of Scranton. It's been in the family since 1952 and my wife and I occupy one of the apartments. We have parking for 2 vehicles, which my wife and I consume. We have always had a no parking zone on the westerly side of Main Avenue. Our 3 tenants traditionally park on the northerly side of Orem Street. 2 of our 3 tenants are senior citizens, and the other tenant is a single male in his late 50s. Most of the time, parking is available along the northerly side of Orem Street. This parking restriction would require our tenants to find parking in the 1200 of Orem or somewhere along the 700 or 800 of Main or Hyde Park. This will also extend their walk to their residences at night. While they sometimes are required to do that now, this change would require them to source alternate parking all of the time. We feel we will lose these high-quality tenants, 2 of whom have been with us for over 20 years and 1 10. In addition to the issues this project is causing me, the project causes parking issues for 2 business operations recently opened at the corner of Hyde Park Avenue and Orem Street. I would also like to point out that on the northwesterly corner of Main and Orem, an old steel utility pole exists that has no wires or lights on it of any kind. This pole provides the biggest impediment to traffic congestion as drivers are always afraid of hitting it. This dormant utility pole should be removed for smooth traffic flow. The expansion of this no parking zone will also entice off-route tractor drivers who ignore the low bridge sign to use the street because of its openness. I'm thinking my concerns probably will not cause you to rethink the expansion of the no parking zone on the northern side of westbound Orem Street. Ideally, for the sake of my neighbors, the new businesses, and myself, please consider not expanding this no parking zone. If your final decision is to put the expansion of the no parking zone in place, then I would like the city to consider providing me with a grant to create a parking area for my tenants by paving the grassy area between the curb along the northerly side of Orem Street and my sidewalks, or at least a no-charge permit to do this modification. Please keep me informed of the outcome of this commentary. The second submission is provided by Ms. Bev DeBarros as follows. Dear friends, about that sign with the curse word in Spanish, if that would have been the same word in the same predominantly displayed location, written in English, would it also have been permitted? Vulgar graffiti is not tolerated. Also, I didn't hear the response to Marie Schumacher's question about the Cup House pool. I wish we had at least 4 small pools throughout the city so our kids could enjoy the benefits of summer swimming. Why wait for a very big pool at NAOG, which is not always accessible to our kids anyway? When that whole slide installation was erected, who got to use it but mostly the richer families from out of the city? The admission fee was prohibitive for our local neighbors. Please consider using some of our empty lots for b-ball, a few swings and benches, etc. In addition to the exercise and fun of playing together outside, friendships can be developed, making us more of a real community. And the third and final submission is from Mr. Tom Coyne as follows. Scranton City Council, it has been a while since I presented before you, and it seems some of the same issues raised a year ago are still raised unresolved. First, as a suggestion, I would invest in a few fire plug caps to use instead of the pool to make temporary low-cost splash areas. Add outdoor rubber mats that can be assembled and disassembled on spot, and you have a splash pad that can be mobile once the pool project is complete to be used at other sites. If large inner cities can have them installed on fire plugs as splash areas, maybe something like that could be used as a splash zone, allowing some water play in NAOG Park this summer with minimal effort. It's not a giant pool, but with a few installed, it would offer something. After construction is complete, fire plug sprayers could be used in coordination with summer events if requested, alone or with mats, since assembled mats can be adjusted to the size needed. Second, trash. Long ago, I suggested isolation of the garbage collection funds from the general funds. This was inspired by Baltimore when they raised new funds for schools from the casinos. Baltimore was allowed to collect funds, but they had to keep all collected funds in a separate, sequestered fund. It was not mixed in with the general city funds and could only be spent on the schools. In our case, only on trash sanitation. This separation allows auditing, being responsible to the letter of the code and law, and provides a single point audit for both cost and revenue generation. It isolates the garbage fee from the general fund. Language also needs to be binding that no funds can be migrated out of that fund to any other city operation or expenditure. No line transfers. Third, the mayor has used the state of emergency as an excuse for a year now to avoid protocol, ignoring hiring and required interviews, summarily ignoring city council mandated pay scale, eliminating workers budgeted for hire as a city employee to create an unbid HR position at will, handing out the position to a new fire chief by fiat, creating public safety rules for the pandemic, the role of city council and not the mayor, per the home rule charter, as the mayor only enforces. It's council's job to legislate rules, including on health and safety. None of the COVID orders obeyed the time requirements. This police chief should not be allowed to rise to the spot as it is prohibited, and nothing in the law allowed the mayor to break the law or change the city code of rule and ethics. Unless you are ready to install a new code, that Scranton laws and city codes are now optional. Retrospective laws are an abomination, and retroactive hiring is just a way to abuse a legal structure. If the time is too short, change it going forward. But as for now, the law is what it is. You can't have it both ways and expect to be respected. Fourth, I understand the reason people want to speak at council and have a voice. The inflection words produce is much more than the context of dry text. Public speech can move people more than just words, and that is missing. Fifth, as I have more to submit but limited time, water main repairs were done at Oak Avenue and Nancy Drive in Manuka. The road was cut, and though well done, a square patch was left in place. The cut curb section was replaced, but it was not a curb-to-curb pave as suggested. And last, why would the city outsource again with a maintenance and upkeep fee, a city portal that can be built, owned, and internally operated? Questions asked are proper. If provides, we leave how will the information be provided? What format will it be in? Are there conversion tools OpenGov provides to aid in that transition? And what other government body has pulled its data from OpenGov? wisdom says to reach out to one of those critics for input for how an exit went before jumping into the deep end. Thank you for your time, Mr. Coyne. And that is all, Councilman Gahn.
Thank you. On the question? On the question, just to respond, well, first of all, I want to thank Mr. Clark, Mr. Barros, and Mr. Coyne for submitting comments tonight. With Mr. Clark's concerns regarding the parking changes on Orem Street, Mrs. Reed has been taking those comments and has reached out to PennDOT, and PennDOT has responded really quick, which we appreciate. So I just want to read their response. This is from Tom Picarella, I think I'm saying his last name right, the Assistant Traffic Engineer for Signals at PennDOT. And to Mr. Clarkson's concerns, he said that PennDOT has adjusted the lane striping to maintain at least one of the two parking spots on Orem Street for Mr. Clark's tenant at 801, 803 Main Ave. He also states that in order to maintain the second parking spot, PennDOT has to modify the existing curb radius at the corner of Orem and Main to help buses make the turn, which may be possible with a redesign of the corner curb. In regards to the iron pole that Mr. Clark mentioned at the corner of Orem and Main, Mr. Clark mentioned it as an obstruction, PennDOT plans on removing that. In regards to the no parking on the southern side of Orem Street for the business at the corner of Orem and Hyde Park, the business has a small parking lot on Hyde Park Avenue. Also, PennDOT does not believe any customers have been parking on the southern side of Orem Street since there's not enough room for through traffic if Mr. Clark's tenants park on one side of Orem and business customers park on the opposite side of Park Avenue. So this was just sent to us this afternoon, so I'll forward that to the rest of council if it hasn't been already. And hopefully that takes care of some of the concerns there. As for Mr. Barros, her comments, we appreciate those. And as for the Kapaus pool, I believe that this was part of a larger conversation that's being had in regards to the overall kind of revitalization of Pine Brook. And I know that the city, in conjunction with one of the nonprofits, now the name is escaping me, is going for grant money and looking to redesign that area, whether it's, I don't know if they were going to have it be a pool or some kind of play area. And Mr. Coyne's comments, we will definitely take into consideration. And I think one of his concerns had to do with Nancy Drive up in Manuka and a pave cut. So Mrs. Reed, if we can get that information to the pave cut inspector, that would be great. That's all I have. Anyone else on the question?
Just to add on the Kapaus Pool question too, I think, we have to wait for our assessment too from McLean and Associates.
Right.
I believe that would be a part of it, and then that gets some of that front end work done where, then we could go out and start applying for grants to, help get that area, cleaned up and useful again for the residents of that area.
Yeah,
I agree. I believe that's what they're weighing on, but then there's also the Pine Brook revitalization.
Yes. The Pine Brook revitalization is more.
Right. And so I know that they're well aware of the Kapaus pool and want,
yes,
also want to see that not necessarily fixed, but turned into something that's usable for the neighborhood.
Okay. Anyone else on the question?
I just want to touch on the Orem Street piece. So my understanding, I haven't seen the correspondence from PennDOT yet. So my understanding is they're going to provide or potentially provide parking spots for the tenants that were mentioned. But I thought that no parking piece goes up even farther, halfway to the middle of the block. So I'd like to get some more data or confirmation on that. I read the piece that came to us, but it's very confusing at this point to me with the map.
Yeah, I think what we can do. Oh, I'm sorry, Mark, you froze, and then I thought you stopped talking. Go ahead.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I'm just still a little confused, or the way it's written, it's confusing. So I just want more clarity.
Yeah, I think it might make sense if we introduce it tonight and then we have next week for final passage. If we maybe get on a call with Mr. Picarella from PennDOT, he seems to be really knowledgeable. Well, he is knowledgeable. He's the head person in terms of signals for PennDOT. So maybe if we set up or schedule a call with you or and Kyle or whoever else wants to get on it, that would probably be helpful to go through a point by point.
Yeah, with that being said, I mean, I wouldn't mind getting on that call either. I was going to ask some of my questions I was going to put them on the question.
Yeah,
for
sure.
the piece.
Yeah, sure. So Lori, if you can reach out to Mr. Picarella, and if Mark and Tom want to get on a call with him, that would be great before next week.
Will do. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anyone else on the question? Very good. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it, and so moved. Okay, we do have two guests here tonight. One, Carl Dealey, is a glutton for punishment. He keeps coming back, always with a smile on his face, and he's been very good to us in terms of giving us information and always coming to council, which we appreciate very much. And we also have Kelly Lindsay here from Kohansky Company, who has been the lead with our 2019 audit, which we received and put in third order back on our March 9th agenda. So I'll turn it over to you, Carl and Kelly, if you just want to run through some of the bigger points from the audit and anything else that you'd like to present. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Gone. It is always a pleasure to speak to council and obviously to receive the kind of feedback in terms of how we're doing and what we need to do better. And this is obviously a good introduction, I think, to where we're at right now. So the 2019 audit, and I'll hand it over to Kelly in a moment, just so she can give you the highlights. And again, this is obviously the first time I'm going through this process. So again, I think in terms of the information that council maybe would require in the future, or maybe how you want these exits kind of meetings to go, I think that would be very helpful, so we can work on that. And we did come out of the audit with several improvements that were identified, I think, from Kelly and the team at Kohansky. So we've got those, and I'd like to cover a couple of those at the end, and also the schedule for the 2020 audit as well. So at this point, Kelly, if I can hand it over to you and obviously provide the key points, I think, from the takeaways for 2019. Thanks.
Sure. Okay. Thank you for having me tonight. So regrettably, this information is a little outdated, so I'll try to make it brief. If we could start with the independent auditors report, I'll just point out a few things that kind of are important to understand about the audit process and what we're doing. If you look at the first page of the independent auditors report, the second paragraph actually is management's responsibility for the financial statements. And if you read this, what it says is that management is responsible for the preparation of these financial statements. So that includes everything from, gathering the data and then, controlling the data, making sure internal controls are in place, and then, ultimately preparing this financial statement. The next paragraph goes on to read that our responsibility as auditors is only to give an opinion on these financial statements. So even though we prepare the financial statements and put the data in here, ultimately it's management's responsibility for the content. The next thing I'd like to point out is the last paragraph on the first page talks about our process a little bit. And it talks about how in performing the audit, we as auditors have to look at the risks and try to determine, the best approach to the audit to minimize any misstatements. As part of that, we do spend time looking at the internal controls of the city to make sure that the controls are in place to prevent misstatements from happening. That was a little bit challenging this year, given the restrictions on being on site at the city. We were able to do some work that we normally would do. This year in particular, we really took a look at the payroll cycle. And we're able to do some tests of controls over the payroll process. Usually we just pick one area and kind of zero in on that and really look at it more closely than we would in some years. So fortunately, at the beginning of the summer, before things really started to get locked down, we were able to come on site and do some tests of controls over the payroll data. And we were happy to report that we didn't have any control findings with that process, or just in general with any of the internal controls that we were able to review. So that, is part of the audit process. So we were able to do that, fortunately, with the lockdowns. If you turn to the next page, this is the summary of our opinions. Again, you will see that the only adverse opinion is on the aggregate discretely presented component unit, which is the parking authority. Again, we've talked about ways to address that. And I think ultimately, the only way to make this go away is if there's some way that the parking authority can be audited. I think we're still trying to work through that.
Hey, Kelly, not to interrupt you, but that's been an adverse opinion now for a number of years, correct? I feel like that's always comes up every time we have an audit.
Yes, I believe so.
Okay.
All of the other opinions on all of the individual funds, and then the overall entity opinions are all unmodified. So what that means is that all of the information presented in the financial statements is presented in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles, and there's nothing outside of the way that should be. So that's good. Are there any other questions about the auditor's report?
No, just and I think we went over this a little bit the last time that you would come in, but in terms of the parking authority, what would they have to do? They have to have their own audit, or you have to have access to their files, or how does that work?
Well, two things could happen. Someone else could come in and do an audit of that entity, or, we as the city's auditors could be engaged to do that as an extension of the city's audit. I really don't know, we haven't spent much time looking at it. I don't know, what that would look like in terms of the audit, because I'm not sure, what, obviously the assets of the parking authority still exist, but beyond that, I'm not sure what an audit would entail.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other questions on that portion of it?
With that being said, I mean, maybe Mr. Hayes, what's the best way to get an audit of the parking authority done?
I'm sorry, what was that again, Tom?
So this piece has come up at adverse for several audits. What is the best way to get an audit of the parking authority done?
I don't know. I think, at this point in time, we'd have to, I don't know what the best option is at this point in time. I mean, we can go off the record, and talk about some legal avenues that we could pursue. I don't know that I want to say them right here, but, that's something I can research for you.
Yeah, with that being said, I didn't mean to put you on the spot with that. I was wondering if that was, is that something council just needs to request, or does it have to go through a different route?
I think council can request it and see what the initial response would be. And if they don't, then we can look at other more formal ways to get it.
Okay, thank you.
I'll look into it for you, Tom.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Did you have anything else, Kelly?
It's up to you. I'm happy to go through some of the numbers in the financial statements. Like I said, we're looking at December of 2019. So some of this, after the year we've had seems like a long time ago.
Yeah, I'd be interested, and I mean, I was looking at this before. If you could just highlight surplus, fund balance, some of those bigger numbers.
Okay. All right. So if everyone could look at page 8, I think the statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balances is probably where the most useful information is. If we want to look at kind of recap the year ended 2019. If you look toward the middle of the page, a couple of things that I think are important to highlight is that during that year in question, the debt was reduced by 6.4 million. And if you go down a little bit further on that page, you'll see that really the only new debt that was incurred during that year were some leases for some capital equipment. So you paid down 6.4 million, and there was only about $400,000 of new debt that was undertaken that year. So I think that that's important to note. You'll also see that there was a significant amount of capital outlay during the year. There was approximately $5 million in investment back into the city. Included in there was over $1 million in the city's parks. There was about $700,000 in sidewalk renovations and almost $3 million in new equipment purchased for the city. So with those two things, when you think about those two things, and then in total, the general fund finished with a positive number. Most of the other funds did as well. So I think that's important to note. I do want to point out too that if you look at it, there is a $22 million decrease in fund balance in the general fund. And I think it's important to note what happened there was that the money related to the sale of the sewer authority was sitting an investment in an investment account in the general fund. That money was just transferred to special cities, more just as an accounting procedure. So you'll see that money shifted from the general fund to special cities. So when you're looking at that negative $22 million decrease in the general fund balance, that is why that happened.
Okay.
Any other questions?
My question is more towards just the process. Obviously, we know that the audit was very late this year compared to, when by the code we should have it. Now, I know that you and Carl and the administration provided updates every few weeks, which we appreciated. But and I know that the pandemic had, something to do with the fact that it was late, but can you just talk about that? Maybe Carl or Kelly, whoever wants to take that question on the reason for the lateness of the audit.
Absolutely. And obviously Kelly was in the weeds on this stuff. And when we first started looking at this, and we met in July was the first meeting, right, Kelly? And we put together an outline for the activities in terms of breakdown of what the requirements were to track the handover of information to Kahansky. And, also we were tracking that, but we had several issues, I think, where the information, when it was taken across, was not either complete, or we had questions about the information, which then the back and forth, I think, between the different departments, became an issue. And so, yeah, we were meeting on this regularly, and of course, Kahansky too. We're not the only entity, right, that they support either. So, we've got a timeline. When we go off that timeline, I know it puts pressure on Kahansky to do this. So we do have kind of, I think, 9 items of kind of, I say, material things that we need to work on. Most of them process related, in terms of the way that we're doing our accounting, that we need to improve on going into for the 2020 audit. We did meet today actually to start that process of revising that timeline. So identifying in more detail what the requirements are from the city side to provide to Kahansky. So what we're doing is we're both on the city side and Kahansky, we after today's meeting, is putting those details together. We're going to get back together the week after next to put a much more defined plan together that we can track and obviously make it more visible. And the other reason for this is not just the fact that it's delayed, right? It's badly delayed, which is not acceptable, is that what we do this year, we do need to incorporate into the new operating system, into OpenGov. So the information that we require for the audits, we can make that more readily available. And in terms of the doing, I think one thing that Kelly mentioned about was the pressure testing, right? So in doing the testing, we can do that as well internally. So we don't have to kind of put that burden on just on the auditor. So there's a lot of benefits that we can build into the schedule for the 2020 audit, which we can then put into OpenGov. So that will take out a lot of the manual work. And I think as you may know from previous years, and something I've learned now the hard way, there's a lot of manual transposition of data, a lot of kind of downloading the information, cross-referencing on Excel spreadsheets, which are prone to error. I think that's where a lot of the delays came from. And I think, as Kelly mentioned, it didn't help. The pandemic didn't help. Obviously, we've got people in the office and working from home, which doesn't help. But yeah, overall, we had a plan, but I think the execution of that plan wasn't good. And so I think it was the execution needs to improve, and the level of the detail of that plan needs to improve as well. So I think the plan was delinquent, and basically the execution of that plan too, I think, was delinquent. So that's what we're working on now, which again, I think the week after next, we can absolutely share that, I think, with council as well, so we can see what the plan is for 2020, and you'll be able to see the side by side what the plan was for 2019 versus what we're now going to do. Look, Kelly, obviously you have some comments on this. You are obviously dealing with the detail, the back and forth, right? So you probably have more, more detail in terms of maybe what the issues were, right, with getting the tasks done on time.
Okay. We did receive some of the information to do the audit earlier in the year. So we were, like I said before, we were able to get in and do some of the internal control testing and some of the smaller funds. I think just with some of the issues with the pandemic, I know the cyber incident at the City Hall had something to do with it, but we really didn't get most of the information we needed to do the audit as a result of many factors until October. We were able to get the testing done. Most of it was remote. It was a little bit challenging this year, for sure. But then ultimately, there was the report that we needed from the actuary on the OPEB plan that held it up. That information wasn't received until January. So once we had that, we were able to complete the audit and all of the reporting within a couple of weeks, and we had the financial statements issued mid-February. So, there was a lot of different things that went on this year. Hopefully those, definitely won't be repeated for 2020. And
believe me,
we have a good plan.
Yeah, we hope that they're not repeated. We don't want another.
Yeah.
This has been 2020 is hopefully no more pandemics, or it's terrible, but yeah, we appreciate it very much. Any other questions or comments?
I was going to bring up pretty much the same thing you did, Billy. I mean, I still hear from people constantly about not this year's audit, last year's audit, the year before. So, and the timeliness of it. And, we're trying to put a budget together. It's very hard without the numbers. So I'm glad to hear there's a plan in place. I hope to hear good things next year around this time, or actually before, and that maybe OpenGov is the answer. I hope it is, and helps us streamline some of this process for everybody.
On that count, we've done some benchmarking as well across kind of other cities, municipalities, in terms of, their audit performance, and also their the documentation of that. So that's something else we want to bring into it. So, we can learn, right? We can learn from other municipalities as well in terms of what they're doing, and we can see the ones that do it well and the timing of what they do. So that, the intent is, and as we discussed last week, is really a step change, right, in the way that we manage data. And it's certainly for recording, reporting, the transparency of that, the access to that data. Ultimately, we're going to get the tools in place to do it. We've just got to make sure, I think we have the processes as well that obviously live up to that, so they actually match the capability of the system.
Okay, thanks, Carl. Any questions on the audit for Kelly or Carl? Okay, I think we're good. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it, and thanks for working with us on that.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Callahan, I just had a couple questions for, if we're finished with the audit piece, those couple questions for Mr. Deely.
Yeah, sure. Carl, would you mind sticking around for a few minutes?
Absolutely, my pleasure.
Okay. Thanks, Kelly. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, yeah, so when looking at third order, Mr. Deely, if you could hear me, I think it was, let me get back to it, 3C. It seemed like there was some confusion over the date to submit intent for retirement. Could you kind of explain what was going on there?
Yeah, I don't know I'm not sure what the confusion was. It'd be good to know, I mean, who was confused and when they were confused. I could probably answer the question easier, but in terms of the submits for the retirements, it relates to the start of the changes, right, for I suppose, for the benefits package. So people can retire under the old CBA, right, up to a certain point when the new conditions come into play. So from the benefits perspective, the 1st of April is when for the clerical union comes into play. So if people retired, I think it was based on the lead time for the processing of their request. So I'm not sure what the date was now, but after the pension meeting that we had last month, we actually held it open so that we could allow people time to put their request in for that retirement package.
Yeah, I saw there was like I think the date was like maybe February 28th, but then it might have went to the end of the year. And I saw in those meeting minutes, there was a lot of discussion about that date.
Yeah, I can certainly look back in my notes and find out the exact timeline on that and the communications that we had.
Yeah, and then the other thing I felt that in those minutes, I think you made a comment that with City Hall being closed, it was hard to work out some of those details. Possibly, I don't remember what the exact phrase was, but does the administration have a timeline to open up City Hall and get all of the services?
No, it's a priority, obviously, for any business, right, including City Hall. So, as you know, we're partially open right now. We're open by appointment as required. But yes, we're actually doing a readiness check on that right now. We started that last week, going around all of the kind of public buildings and getting them ready. We do have some modifications which we're making, just from a security perspective as well as a public health perspective. So yeah, we're planning to obviously to open as soon as we can, and that's something which I'm thinking is going to be in line, obviously, with guidelines that we get from the state, and maybe see what other municipalities are doing. But we are getting ready to open in terms of when we get the go ahead and we get the approval, then we can open the door. So the timing on that, I think that's something we can talk about, and we should talk about, I think, with council as well in terms of what's appropriate.
Yeah, with the readiness study or the readiness check, is there a timeline for the completion of that?
Yeah, so we've got that for the buildings that we have, so we know what we need to do. We've got some security things that we're going to work on at City Hall that's got a 4-week lead time. So that what basically that does, it ensures that we've got proper access to the public, but we've also got the necessary restrictions as well, right, for the safety of the employees as well in the building.
And then item 3I, it was the cost and financial disclosures there on that open government piece. Some of the answers in those sheets, the term specific personnel names after execution of contract. Can you give just an explanation on that?
That I'll have to take a look at. I know our legal department went through this with OpenGov, before we put the contract forward. So I'll have to just take a look at that and kind of get a full explanation of it.
I'm trying to see what it specifically was about. List the names of individuals that have a registered federal or state lobbyist. And I think it just said, provide specific personnel names after contract execution.
Yeah, I don't know. I'll have to take a look at that. Do you know what page was it on?
It's on page, actually the pages aren't numbered. It's on page 6 of 7.
Okay, got it.
6 of 7, number 1, and there was 2 subcategories under number 1 and then number 2.
Okay. No, I'll take a look at that and I'll get an answer to you.
I think I'm reading that now. The first part says not applicable.
Yeah, I guess that's where my confusion is. It seems like it's not applicable, but then it's kind of it seems to read like if there's someone doing that, the names will be given after the contract is executed. I mean, just that language is confusing.
It sounds strange, right?
Okay. Any other questions?
That's all for me.
Okay. Anybody else? All right. I think that's it, Carl.
My pleasure.
Really.
Speak to you later in the week and probably see you next week.
Okay. Thank you very much. We appreciate it. Have a good night.
Carl,
Yes, sir. Thanks.
Okay, Mrs. Reed.
Thank you. Fifth order, 5A motions.
Thank you. Councilman Schuster, any motions or comments? Oh, you were muted, Tom.
No, nothing at this time.
Okay, thank you. Councilman McAndrew, any motions or comments?
I do. We all received this correspondence from a concerned resident over on Luzerne Street. Pointing out to this address, 1814 Luzerne Street. I mean, there's a ton of concerns here. I'm just going to bullet some of them so we can circle around, or have the police and LIPS department circle around. So it's an apartment building, 3-unit apartment. From my understanding, this is the letter I received from speaking with the zoning, that the basement is actually condemned. I've been told that it was and it wasn't. 2 upstairs units are occupied, but the real issue is there's trash everywhere. They're finding hypodermic needles blowing around in the yard. This is a neighbor. The chimney fell off last year, and now there's a large gutter hanging. And this is where kids, I know they're not in school yet, but they'll be going back soon, that walk through this area, and that court, it's on Chris Court, part of that. So this is a huge safety issue, first of all, especially with the hypodermic needles. That's even beyond belief. There's a lot of drug activity being observed. They've made some complaints to the police department. Cars come out. Cars are coming, going all hours of the night. There's a constant smell of marijuana. Tenants are fighting. All different types of license plates from different states. I guess they've tried to reach out to the mayor with no response, and the LIPS department no response. I guess there's a new code officer. There's rats running around there now. So I guess, this was looked at. Maybe there was a little remedy, but now it looks like it's getting worse than it was maybe last year. There's more to it. I mean, you've all seen this email, I guess, or maybe you didn't have the opportunity yet. So, Mrs. Reed, if I think you forwarded to us. So if you can maybe circle around, reach out to the LIPS department. Let's get an update on this property. Maybe also send some correspondence to the police department that they should probably take another look at this residence, and have them report back to us. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Dr. Rothschild, any motions or comments?
I have some on one of the pieces of legislation that I'm going to speak to later tonight, I believe, 5C. So I'll just, on the question, I'll discuss it at that point.
Okay, thank you. And Councilman Donahue, any motions or comments? Oh, you're muted, Kyle.
Sorry, I was going to bring up the same thing as Mr. McAndrew, but as long as that's being forwarded along, I have nothing at this time.
Okay, thank you. I just have a few comments. So I want to thank John Pochis, our city engineer, and our city solicitor, Joe O'Brien, who are drafting legislation and who are currently working on not a fix, but something I think will help the neighbors on 3rd Avenue. So that should be coming down soon. We received a recommendation from Mr. Pochis, and I'm looking forward to voting on that. So there should be some relief for the residents on 3rd Avenue. Also, I want to thank the Chief of Police and Justin Butler, who is in charge of the traffic division, for quick action on an issue that I had brought up. Neighbors had reached out to me about speeding at Sanderson and Electric Street. So they are potentially going to put an electric speed sign in the area, which we think will help. And also we reached out to DPW at the request of residents there for crosswalks, and the director got back to us quickly that they're going to look into doing that if possible. Also, I want to thank Brian Fallon and the Parks and Rec employees traveling around the city. And I also live across the street from a park. They've been out working very, very hard the last week and a half as the weather gets nicer to have our parks prepared for the spring and the summer. They're doing a really good job. So I've driven by a few parks and they look good, and they're in the process of getting them ready. Also, Mrs. Reed, if we can reach out to Senator Blake's office, I think they were the contact information or the contact for the wall at the Radisson on Lackawanna Avenue. A few years ago, there was a grant that was in play, or that I think the county may have received through Senator Blake's office or something along those lines. I can't remember off the top of my head, to rehab that wall there when you're either leaving downtown Scranton past the Lackawanna Avenue at the Radisson. That wall is falling apart. It's really it looks very, very bad, and I think it's dangerous. So there was some movement to fix that, and I'm not really sure what happened with it. So I'd like to just see if we can work together with them and try to get that up and running again. Also, I received a complaint from a gentleman in the North Scranton section, right behind Holy Rosary Hall. They're having some problems with a apartment building, basically dumping garbage, couches, things. They're not putting them in the dumpster. They have a private hauler, and I did make my way over there several times. This issue goes back a few months on and off, and it's really bad. So if we can just remind the Lips Department and see if they can try to do something about that. And also, I want to again thank the DPW and thank the DPW director. There was a gentleman, actually a retired Scranton police officer, a very nice gentleman, reached out to me months ago about a drainage issue over on Paul Avenue in the hill section. And it took a little while, but the DPW took care of that. They installed a new storm drainage system, and that gentleman was very pleased, and so were the neighbors over there. So that'll take care of that problem. Also, I wanted to, as the weather gets nicer, I want Mrs. Reed, if you can check in with the administration. I know last year I had made a suggestion about a park ambassador program. Just a suggestion, I thought, in looking at what other cities do with large park systems like ours. And I know that the mayor had said that they were looking into that. So if we can see if they've made any progress there. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. 5B for introduction, an ordinance establishing a no parking zone for ECMS 102866 SR 3013, Section 203, City of Scranton Main Avenue Signal Project, Main Avenue and Orem Street, permit number 7905.
This time I'll entertain a motion that item 5B be introduced into its proper committee.
So moved.
On the question?
On the question,
So, on the question,
go ahead, Tom.
Sorry, go ahead, Mark.
Well, thank you. I'll vote to move this for introduction, but I'm nowhere near a yes vote at this time. There's going to be residents, even beyond that one piece of property, that have lived there their whole life, who can't park in front of their house. So the people at PennDOT, I mean, I'm sure when they go home, the ones who wrote this, go home and are able to park.
Mark, we lost you. I think he froze. I hope he froze.
Entertained, but I'll have to hear some.
There it is.
I'm sorry, what?
Mark, we lost you for 20 seconds.
I'll just summarize. I'll vote for introduction, but I just don't like. I don't understand the rationale or the reasoning for this change.
Okay, thank you.
I would have to parallel some of what Mark is saying. Looking at this one, I lived on the corner of North Main Avenue and Putnam in North Scranton, and we had a similar incident when one of the 4-unit apartments there opened up and started taking residents. It caused the parking situation moving up Putnam, going onto Church Ave, and it caused a lot of issues there. So, I mean, I have several questions about it. First of all, are there any negative effects of voting this down? Does it affect anything with PennDOT or any of the PennDOT monies of this project? how many homes are affected, how many residents are affected, because a lot of the homes in that specific intersection on both sides of Main are apartment buildings. And it also gets me to think of that chain reaction that happened in North Scranton as those cars started moving up the street. And it's going to be a similar situation here, moving up Orem and then moving down High Park Ave. Also, when looking at it, how many intersections are affected as we go down Main Avenue? It doesn't seem to be just this one intersection. It seems to be several as they're moving, so I'm not really clear on that one. But there does seem to be a lot of negative consequences here with with the business, with the amounts of residents affected, and also we spoke about the issue of the bridge with tractor trailers, and those tractor trailers now getting into the Trip Park area and then getting over onto Clearview Street in North Scranton. And the resident does have a point there with maybe these tractor trailers ending up Orem Street, which is a larger road. But once it gets into other sections, the offshoots off of Orem are tighter squeezes. So several questions on that piece of legislation.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I would just like to add that, I agree that I don't really, knowing that area, I really don't see the need. So I appreciate PennDOT getting back to us so quickly, but I still don't see the justification yet.
I'm with everyone else. I want to know what, what it's needed for. I think it does mention that it's going to make it safer for that intersection, but I don't see how. So if we can get more specifics and information before next week, that would be appreciated.
Yeah, I think we should set up a meeting with Mr. Picarella from PennDOT and make sure that we get all these questions answered. One thing I do know is that this piece of legislation also deals with the traffic signal, which is extremely old and does need to be replaced. And the good thing that PennDOT is doing is funding this entire project. The city is not paying for any of it. But I would agree. I think we need all the questions answered, and so we'll introduce it tonight. And then Mrs. Reed, if you can reach out to Mr. Picarella and the other representatives at PennDOT, and we'll try to schedule a meeting and get these questions answered. And even if they're open to coming to a caucus next week, if that would help, because I'm sure there's people in that portion of West Scranton and on Orem Street who would be interested. That might even be better. Okay. And Mrs. Reed, did you send that, can you send that email from Mr. Picarella out to everyone, and can you also send that email to Mr. Clark?
I believe she did.
Oh, did you? Oh,
send it out to everybody.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I'll forward it to Mr. Clark. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Anyone else on the question? Okay. All those in favor of introduction signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? The ayes have it, and so moved.
5C for introduction and ordinance creating Chapter 426 of the Home Rule Charter entitled Sexual Orientation or Gender Conversion Efforts.
At this time, I'll entertain a motion that item 5C be introduced into its proper committee.
So moved.
So moved. Second.
On the question?
Yes, on the question, I wanted to speak specifically to this piece of legislation. This is something that I brought forward to council and to the administration that I felt it was important for us to address. So I just wanted to explain a little bit more about it. I know my fellow council members have had time to review it, but I'm open to additional questions about it. So this is being introduced tonight to help protect the LGBTQ community from the harmful practices of conversion therapy. We also reference it as conversion efforts in this legislation because we don't, it's not really a form of therapy, but that's kind of how it's become known as. And conversion therapy specifically refers to any practices or treatment that seeks to convert one's sexual orientation or gender identity or expression including efforts to change behaviors or to eliminate or reduce sexual or romantic attractions or feeling towards individuals of the same sex. So this would specifically apply to just to mental health professionals who are working with minors under the age of 18. So conversion therapy is a practice that still occurs today, unfortunately, and it's been proven not only to be ineffective, but it's also can be very harmful and detrimental to a person's well-being, the opposite of really what therapy and mental health services are supposed to do for an individual. And there's also been surveys that have showed like an increased rate of attempted suicide among LGBTQ youth who've been victims of these conversion efforts. So it really does have significant consequences. And it's just been discredited by so many professional associations over the years, I mean, over decades. So there is a lot out there. And as you can see in this legislation too, pointed out why this is something that should be banned within our city. And there's been a lack of action from the state of Pennsylvania on conversion therapy over the years. There has been legislation introduced several times, but it just hasn't been acted on. And so that's why many municipalities and counties in Pennsylvania have taken it into their own hands and passed similar pieces of legislation to help protect the LGBTQ community. So there are other places that are specified in the legislation, but to name a few: Allentown, Erie, Bethlehem, Reading, and of course, like the bigger cities like Philly and Pittsburgh. But there's also smaller boroughs too that have passed this. So really, I think Scranton is behind in this. I did talk last week to the Human Relations Ordinance that was passed many years ago. This is separate and different from that, but still related to, like I said, protecting the LGBTQ community in Scranton. And it'll establish a fine system for violators, and hopefully we won't have any violators of the ordinance, and that it won't need to be addressed, but at least this is being done in a proactive way, so we have these protections in place. So I believe that was everything that I wanted to say with regards to this legislation. But if there's any other questions or comments, I welcome them.
Thank you. Anyone else on the question?
Yes, as actually the only mental health professional on council right now, I think I'd like to say a couple things. Some of the things I just said are correct. It's been tied up in the state. I think it's been tabled at the state level since 2010, at least. Is that correct, Jeff?
Yeah, probably around that time. I think Representative Brian Sims, one of our outgate legislators, was one to introduce this type of legislation.
Yeah, I do work with the Office of Mental Health and Substance Abuse, or OMSAS, and just to say, I don't believe there's any facilities of this nature in the city of Scranton. I don't know if there's any operating under the state, and the Office of Mental Health and Substance Abuse and other licensing bodies also do not license therapy of this nature. So I think what Jess was saying is this is a proactive measure that this type of thing doesn't happen within our city limits. Do we know if there's any need for a ban on this type of therapy or the practice of?
Like I said, there are LGBTQ individuals who have experienced these conversion efforts, and from mental health professionals. I can't speak to any individuals or practices within our city limits that are including this this form of therapy in their practices, but it doesn't mean that it's not out there, and maybe people didn't have a place to come forward about it. And so now we're saying as a city, if you are experiencing this, we want to know about it. And we want we want it to end.
Yeah, and I think as a proactive measure, it's a good thing. And so people could rest easy. I'm not aware of anyone practicing this in the city of Scranton, or, I mean, I guess I can't speak for the state, but no one would be licensed in the city of Scranton. I don't know of anyone practicing it.
Anyone else on the question?
Bill,
Yes.
it's Kevin. Just wanted to point out, so this legislation was crafted under the leadership of Dr. Rothschild, and we then submitted it to the city law department for formatting. And the title to it, which indicates that there's a change to the home rule charter, is incorrect. So that there's not going to be a change to the home rule charter. There's going to be a new section of the city code. We made that aware. We made the law department aware of that issue, and it'll be corrected before final passage. So I just wanted to point that out.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yes, and I also would be remiss if I didn't thank Solicitor Hayes and his assistance in crafting this legislation as well. He's been a great resource.
You're welcome.
Anyone else on the question? Yeah, I support what Dr. Rothschild is doing here. I think it is proactive, and my philosophy on life is live and let live. So, I support what she's doing here, and thank her for her work on this. Anyone else? All those in favor of introduction signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it, and so moved.
5D for introduction of resolution authorizing the mayor and other appropriate officials of the city of Scranton to execute and enter into a collective bargaining agreement with the city of Scranton clerical workers and local lodge number 2462, affiliated with the District 1 of the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, AFL-CIO, in accordance with the terms and provisions of a memorandum of understanding with an effective date of January 1, 2021, and ratified by the membership.
At this time, I'll entertain a motion that item 5D be introduced into its proper committee.
So moved.
Second.
On the question? On the question, I'm still reviewing this document. I am glad that the clerical union and the administration came to an agreement to ratify this bargaining agreement. One of the questions I did have just at first glance at this is Article 8, Section 3. It talks about a performance, the establishment of a performance-based bonus or incentive program for employees in any department. And that would occur if the city emerges from the recovery plan or Act 47, which we are going to emerge from that next year for several different reasons that we've discussed in the past. So I don't, obviously they haven't established it yet, but I would like to know if they have any idea on what that might look like, what they might model it after, and how much it might cost, because they're talking about in the memo within the legislation, they're talking about the 2022 budget and having funding in there for it. So I did have a question on that. I also would like to know, so over this time period, what is the overall cost of this contract and what are the proposed what are the proposed savings? They're saying that they're saving from healthcare, which I think it's clear that they will be, but if we could get hard numbers on that. And there's also under the pension and retirement benefits, I do have a question on Section 8. I just want further explanation and clarification on the city putting in a new section here about offering termination incentives. That's a new portion of that's in the contract. So I did have a question. I want a clarification on that. And I'll have more comments as I review the contract. Anyone else? All those in favor of introduction signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? The ayes have it and so moved.
5E for introduction, a resolution accepting a donation presented to the City of Scranton Human Resources Department from Tyrone Holmes, 24 Pennyburn Drive, Scranton, Pennsylvania, to defray the cost of the application fee for a candidate of the Scranton Fire Department Civil Service Examination.
At this time, I'll entertain a motion that item 5E be introduced into its proper committee.
Moved.
Second.
On the question? All those in favor of introduction signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it and so moved.
Sixth order, 6A, reading by title, file of the council number 59, 2021, an ordinance authorizing the mayor and other appropriate officials of the city of Scranton to enter into a lease agreement with the West Scranton Little League Incorporated and Scranton School District for the use of city-owned property as more fully described in the lease agreement attached hereto as Exhibit A for a 5-year period commencing April 15, 2021 and ending April 14, 2026.
You've heard reading by title of item 6A. What is your pleasure?
I move that item 6A pass reading by title.
Second.
On the question?
On the question, I hope this lease agreement clears up any of the confusion that was that had occurred in the past between the district and the city and who rents and owns this field. I think that was the intent.
Thank you. Anyone else on the question? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? The ayes have it and so moved.
Seventh order, 7A, for consideration by the Committee on Finance for adoption, file of the council number 56, 2021, amending file of the council number 8, 1987, an ordinance entitled, amending file of the council number 87, 1976, entitled, an ordinance entitled, providing for the levy and collection of a license for all performers, entertainers, sporting teams, musical groups, bands, theatrical cast, dancing groups, recital groups, paid lecturers, and speakers by increasing fees to decrease the fees due to the COVID-19 pandemic.
I make a motion to amend item 7A in the now therefore clause to insert the following language. Quote, now therefore be it ordained by the council of the city of Scranton that due to the COVID-19 pandemic, which has continued to cause economic issues for businesses and seller of goods in the city of Scranton, thus prompting this temporary amendment and reduction to, end quote.
Second.
On the question? All those in favor of the amendment to item 7A signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it and so moved. What is the recommendation of the chairperson for the Committee on Finance?
As the chairperson for the Committee on Finance, I recommend final passage of 7A. As amended.
As amended. And was there a second?
Second.
On the question? Roll call, please.
Mr. Schuster,
Yes.
Mr. McAndrew,
Yes.
Dr. Rothschild,
Yes.
Mr. Donahue,
Yes.
Mr. Gahn.
Yes, I hereby declare item 7A as amended, legally and lawfully adopted.
7B, for consideration by the Committee on Finance for adoption, file of the council number 57, 2021, amending file of the council number 70, 2016, an ordinance authorizing the creation of an event license to alleviate the direct expense to peddlers and to allow a more efficient operation of various events in the city and imposing an event license fee schedule to decrease the fees due to the COVID-19 pandemic.
I make a motion to amend item 7B by removing the entire fee schedule found in section B, event license fee 1, and inserting the following new fee schedule for event licenses as follows. A, 5 to 10 peddlers, original fee $250, reduced to $50. Subsection B, 11 to 15 peddlers, original fee $300, reduced fee $60. Subsection C, 16 to 20 peddlers, $350 original fee to a $70 reduced fee. Subsection D, 21 to 25 peddlers, a $400 original fee reduced to $80. Subsection E, 26 to 50 peddlers, $500 original fee reduced to $100. And then subsection F, 51 plus peddlers, $1,000 reduced to $200.
Second.
On the peddler, you said peddler so many times, it got in my head. On the question. All those in favor of the amendments to the fee schedule on item 7B signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. So moved. What is the recommendation of the chairperson for the Committee on Finance?
As the chairperson for the Committee of Finance, I recommend final passage of item 7B as amended.
Second.
On the question? Roll call, please.
Mr. Schuster,
Yes.
Mr. McAndrew,
Yes.
Dr. Rothschild,
Yes.
Mr. Donahue,
Yes.
Mr. Gahn.
Yes, I hereby declare item 7B is amended legally and lawfully adopted.
7C for consideration by the Committee on Rules for Adoption, file of the Council number 58, 2021, amending file of the Council number 33, 2013, an ordinance amending sections 340-1, 340-8, 340-9, and 340-13A of the Code of the City of Scranton governing peddling and soliciting within the City of Scranton by further amending the Administrative Code Section 340-13A to decrease the fee by 20% due to the COVID-19 pandemic.
I make a motion to amend item 7C as follows. In the summary title, strike quote by 20% and insert to 20% of its original value. In the first whereas clause, insert after the word quote value, quote 80% reduction, and insert a new whereas clause following the first whereas clause to read, whereas section 340-13A shall be amended as follows. For any annual license for a period of 1 year or for any fractional part of the year that will elapse after the issuance preceding the first Monday of April. Excuse me. Then next to peddle or vend as said from or by means of any bag, basket, crate, or otherwise, howsoever, by a matter of peddling on foot, the rate shall be the rate of $20. Additionally, for a temporary license, which would limit the peddling vending to 5 special events per year, the rate shall be the rate of $15. The license fee shall be for the food cart $10 and for a food truck $50. Strike the existing now therefore clause and insert a new clause to read, now therefore be it ordained by the Council of the City of Scranton that due to the COVID-19 pandemic, which has continued to cause economic issues for businesses and seller of goods in the City of Scranton, thus prompting this temporary amendment and reduction to subsection 340-13A of Chapter 340 of the Code of the City of Scranton, retroactive to January 1st, 2021, and only extends to December 31st, 2021, as stated above.
Second.
On the question? All those in favor of the amendments to item 7C signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? The ayes have it and so moved. As chairperson for the Committee on Rules, I recommend final passage of item 7C as amended.
Second.
On the question? Roll call, please.
Mr. Schuster,
Yes.
Mr. McAndrew,
Yes.
Dr. Rothschild,
Yes.
Mr. Donahue,
Yes.
Mr. Gahn.
Yes, I hereby declare item 7C is amended legally and lawfully adopted.
7D for consideration by the Committee on Community Development for Adoption, Resolution number 140, 2021, amending Resolution number 98, 2020, ratifying and approving of the execution and submission of the grant application by the City of Scranton on behalf of Scranton Area Community Foundation to the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, acting through the Commonwealth Financing Authority for a local share account grant pursuant to the PA Resource Development and Gaming Act in the amount of $63,000 for the project to be known as NEPA Moves, located at 615 Jefferson Avenue, Suite 102, Scranton, Pennsylvania, and authorizing the mayor and other appropriate city officials of the City of Scranton, Pennsylvania, to accept the grant if successful and execute and enter into a local share account grant contract and commitment letter with the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania to accept and utilize the grant in the amount of $63,000 awarded by the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania for such project to reflect the correct amount of the grant application of $75,000.
What is the recommendation of the chairperson for the Committee on Community Development?
As Chair for the Committee on Community Development, I recommend final passage of item 7D.
Second.
On the question? Roll call, please.
Mr. Schuster,
Yes.
Mr. McAndrew,
Yes.
Dr. Rothschild,
Yes.
Mr. Donahue,
Yes.
Mr. Gahn.
Yes, I hereby declare item 7D legally and lawfully adopted.
7E for consideration by the Committee on Rules for Adoption, Resolution number 141, 2021, appointment of Teresa Osborne, 631 Herbert Street, Scranton, Pennsylvania, 18505, to serve as a member of the Human Relations Commission. Ms. Osborne will serve a 5-year term effective February 23, 2021, and will expire on February 23, 2026.
As chairperson for the Committee on Rules, I recommend final passage of item 7E.
Second.
On the question? Roll call, please.
Mr. Schuster,
Yes.
Mr. McAndrew,
Yes.
Dr. Rothschild,
Yes.
Mr. Donahue,
Yes.
Mr. Gahn.
Yes, I hereby declare item 7E legally and lawfully adopted.
7F for consideration by the Committee on Rules for Adoption, Resolution number 142, 2021, reappointment of the Reverend Rebecca Ann Barnes, 801 Wheeler Avenue, Scranton, Pennsylvania, 18510, to serve as a member of the Human Relations Commission. The previous term of Reverend Barnes expired on August 24, 2018, and was held over until February 23, 2021. Her new term will expire on August 24, 2023.
As chairperson for the Committee on Rules, I recommend final passage of item 7F.
Second.
On the question? Roll call, please.
Mr. Schuster,
Yes.
Mr. McAndrew,
Yes.
Dr. Rothschild,
Yes.
Mr. Donahue,
Yes.
Mr. Gahn.
Yes, I hereby declare item 7F legally and lawfully adopted.
7G for consideration by the Committee on Rules for Adoption, Resolution number 143, 2021, appointment of Adela Artley, 1305 Preston Place, Scranton, Pennsylvania, 18504, to serve as a member of the Human Relations Commission. Ms. Artley will serve a 5-year term effective March 2, 2021, and will expire on March 2, 2026.
As chairperson for the Committee on Rules, I recommend final passage of item 7G.
Second.
On the question? Roll call, please.
Mr. Schuster,
Yes.
Mr. McAndrew,
Yes.
Dr. Rothschild,
Yes.
Mr. Donahue,
Yes.
Mr. Gahn.
Yes, I hereby declare item 7G legally and lawfully adopted.
7H for consideration by the Committee on Rules for Adoption, Resolution number 144, 2021, appointment of Rosemary Bohannick, 1445 Thackeray Street, Scranton, Pennsylvania, 18504, to serve as a member of the Human Relations Commission. Ms. Bohannick will serve a 5-year term effective January 29, 2021, and will expire on January 29, 2026.
As chairperson for the Committee on Rules, I recommend final passage of item 7H.
Second.
On the question?
On the question, same as last week, I'd like to congratulate Rosemary Bohannick and the rest of of the people tonight that have been appointed to this board.
Thank you. Anyone else? Roll call, please.
Mr. Schuster,
Yes?
Mr. McAndrew,
Yes.
Dr. Rothschild,
Yes.
Mr. Donahue,
Yes.
Mr. Gahn.
Yes, I hereby declare item 7H legally and lawfully adopted.
7I for consideration by the Committee on Rules for Adoption, Resolution number 145, 2021, authorizing the mayor and other appropriate city officials to execute and enter into a contract between the City of Scranton and OpenGov for implementation of the city management operating system.
As chairperson for the Committee on Rules, I recommend final passage of item 7I.
Second.
On the question? Roll call, please.
Mr. Schuster,
Yes?
Mr. McAndrew,
Yes.
Dr. Rothschild,
Yes.
Mr. Donahue,
Yes.
Mr. Gahn.
Yes, I hereby declare item 7I legally and lawfully adopted.
7J for consideration by the Committee on Rules for Adoption, Resolution number 146, 2021, authorizing the mayor and other appropriate city officials to execute and enter into a contract between the City of Scranton and OpenGov for implementation of the financial management system.
As chairperson for the Committee on Rules, I recommend final passage of item 7J.
Second.
On the question? Roll call, please.
Mr. Schuster,
Yes?
Mr. McAndrew,
Yes.
Dr. Rothschild,
Yes.
Mr. Donahue,
Yes.
Mr. Gahn.
Yes, I hereby declare item 7J legally and lawfully adopted.
8th order, old business, nothing at this time.
There's no further business. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
This meeting is